Before the release of Cour 2, we had a painful drought period of 6 months with little to no updates on the new Bleach anime. We received confirmation of Burn the Witch Season 2 along with a couple of trailers for Cour 2, but other than that it was a long wait. Now in no time at all, 8 episodes of the new season have already aired, and now we are well past the halfway mark with 5 episodes remaining of Cour 2 until we are back again waiting for Cour 3. Undeniably, we have had some absolutely wild episodes so far featuring several intensive battles against formidable Sternritter like Asnod, Gremi and Bambietta. Additionally, during the series of battles between the Quincy and the Shinigami, we have had spectacular new forms from both sides, with notable transformations being Kinpachi's Shikai, Rukia's Bankai, Komamura's human form, and not to mention the impressive true Bankai of Renji, and lastly, Ichigo revealing his new technique Getsuga Jujisho within the most recent episode of Cour 2. So with all of these hype moments and battles occurring within the span of 8 episodes, why is it that there is still a fair bit of controversy surrounding Cour 2 of Bleach? In this video, I want to get down to the bottom of some points of criticism and concern that fans have been expressing. My aim with this video is to break down the criticisms about Bleach and to analyze whether if they have any merit at all to them, or if fans are just being really nitpicky about things. In addition to this, I want to touch base with all of you and discuss how things are progressing in general with Cour 2. Now be sure to stick around until the end of the video because I'll be talking about possible production issues with the Bleach anime, with us having a break this week with a recap episode airing in place of an all-new episode. You definitely don't want to miss the details that I will cover in this update video, discussing all of the good and the bad along with everything in between. So without further delay, here are my thoughts on Cour 2 of Bleach's 1000 Year Blood War arc anime so far. Before we talk about Cour 2 of Bleach's anime, I feel like it would be unfair to discuss it without appreciating how much of a massive undertaking it is to adapt all of this manga content that the Bleach team are currently working with. Now, putting aside the quality that they are aiming for, there is just so many internal and external challenges that the Bleach staff have to contend with while adapting Cour 2 of the anime, and in all honesty, it is really unfair that they are working under these conditions. Let's begin with the content that is being adapted into Cour 2. We learn very quickly that it adapts the entirety of the second invasion all the way up to the raid on the Soul King's palace, which we now know will also adapt the fall of Squad Zero and the incredible battle between Ichibei and Yhwach. Now this would mean that we're getting over 75 chapters worth of manga content within Cour 2 alone. Now this wouldn't be so much of an issue if the content wasn't almost entirely made up of fights. The first challenge that comes with handling so many fights is first of all pinpointing which particular fights need to get the most attention. The best approach to something like this would be figuring out which fan favorite characters would be in these fights. Doing that alone is easy, but they also have to contend with the fact that there are also several different smaller fights also occurring within this core. Now these fights, like Soifon vs BG9 or Hitsugaya vs Kangdu, have potential to be really great, but only if they are given enough love and time. But this creates a very interesting dilemma for the anime staff, who are evidently divided between trying to land the very important fights like Ichibei vs Yhwach and then spicing up the lesser important ones like the earlier fights that we see within the core. The next biggest problem that we have with so many fights being in Cour 2 is the challenge of animating them well to a certain standard. Animating an engaging fight requires a lot of ambitious storyboards, as well as more drawings per episode and far more correction work from animation directors. Now doing all of this should be possible if the staff is given enough time and resources, which brings us to the second factor that the staff have to contend with, which is the lack of time that they have as well as the lack of manpower and resources. We are aware that the layouts for Cour 2 had started being made about as early as November and December of last year. Now this would mean that Cour 2 began production around that time too, which brings us to around 8 months of production time, which is a bit hard to claim when a chunk of the team was still working on Cour 1 at this time. So the 6-month break is really our most solid guess at just how much time that Taguchi and the anime staff had with animating Cour 2. So we're left with 6 months of production time for such a battle heavy core, which is nowhere near enough the amount of time that they need to nail almost every element of Cour 2. This issue could have been overcome if the anime staff had access to a huge network of talented animators who could work quickly and deliver some high quality animation, which leads us to another aspect of the challenges that the anime staff face, which is the lack of manpower on their team. From what I have come to realize about animation, it's not about what you know but who you know. The quantity of talented animators on a project is often tied to who knows whom. If an animator joins a project, it's extremely likely that they'll also invite their animator friends to come and work on the same show. Now, this chain of friends inviting friends also creates a very stacked team of talent for a single particular show. A recent example of this would be Ryu Nakayama and his Chainsaw Man team. On this production, almost every major key animator who appeared on the show was from the same circle of webgen animators. While this is very convenient for the shows where all of the talent is concentrated, it doesn't bode well for the other anime that are airing at the same time in the same season. This often leads to 1 or 2 anime airing in a season getting an absurd amount of talented animators on the show. So shows like Chainsaw Man and Mob Psycho 100 are examples of this. Currently, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is another example of this phenomenon occurring. It inadvertently cripples almost every other show due to the already limited amount of top tier talent that is available, and they are all working on 1 or 2 shows in particular. Now, because of this situation, it's the reason why Core 1 had so many problems with its animation. If you want to know more about the precarious state of the anime industry, let me know in the comments so I can make a dedicated video discussing this subject in particular, because it really is a very interesting one to dive into on its own. This is a problem that mostly affects studios that rely much more on freelancers for their show's production. Mappa manages to mostly pull off working on so many shows at once due to their ability to combine several strong in-house animators as well as their connection to a lot of outside talented freelancers. On the other hand, you have monstrous studios like Toei Animation who boast the highest number of in-house staff in all of Japan, which is how they are able to maintain having to adapt a long-running anime like One Piece and still being able to do a great job at it. Ufotable also has an extremely strong in-house team featuring legends like Masayuki Kunohiro and of course the exceptional Nozomu Abe, which brings us now to Bleach and Studio Pierrot. Gone are the days where Studio Pierrot was the studio every good animator wanted to be on. While it might seem strange now, Studio Pierrot was once a hotspot for talented animators. One could say that Studio Pierrot created an entire generation of fight animators, with absolute legends like Norio Matsumoto, Atsushi Wakabayashi, Shingo Yamashita, and many other talented animators. Some of these animators that I've listed have genuinely grown to become behemoths within the anime industry. A lot of these talented animators were often seen working on long-running shows like Bleach and Naruto, which actually featured some of the best peaks of animation within the industry. Unfortunately, Studio Pierrot failed to evolve with the times and many animators moved on to other studios with less stressful and outdated practices, combined with the fact that Bleach's director Tomohisa Taguchi isn't an animator and as such he lacks the connections to the massive pools of talent that are needed to be able to take on the task of adapting one of the biggest manga works ever. So taking all of these factors into consideration, you can see why it would be difficult for Taguchi to get so many people to work for him on Bleach. But considering how many talented veteran animators Taguchi has been able to get onto the team, I may be selling him a bit too short, and he may be better connected than I think he is. But I guess time will tell as Core 2 progresses and as we get the release of Core 3 and Core 4. So Taguchi's team doesn't have a lot of time, nor does it have all of the manpower necessary, so you might be guessing that the project can be adjusted to work around the limitations, right? Well, you would be wrong in assuming this, because this brings us to probably the biggest internal factor that the team has to deal with, which is their approach towards adapting Bleach. Director Taguchi is a man with a strong love for beautiful visuals. There's been no project of his that doesn't feature his iconic rim lights, stunning compositing, and very strong art direction, which has led to him creating absolute bangers like the award-winning Tunnel to Summer movie, his Digimon and Persona movies, as well as the short but stellar anime Akudama Drive. This same love for strong visuals is carried over into Bleach, where he greatly prioritizes maintaining the integrity of Kubo's art and the visual feel of Bleach. The Bleach anime's art is often noted for being exceptionally good, and not only does it perfectly replicate Kubo's art, but it also manages to make it surpass the manga version of the artwork. This approach, however, makes animating Bleach even more difficult. This love for detail and strong art makes for extremely difficult animation, since it means more detail per frame of animation. This makes it so that even genuinely great animators have a lot of difficulty when they are working on Bleach. This means that only top-of-the-line animators can really handle how demanding it is to work on a project like Bleach. When we put together all of the factors that I have discussed, then we're left with an anime production that is adapting way more content than we have ever seen before, with less time and less manpower in order to properly do it any justice. And when you combine this with a very demanding approach towards animating the show, then it results in Bleach being a very difficult show for animators to work on, and it's hard for the animators to show off their talents as easily as they would be able to with other shows, which might even make working on Bleach unappealing to certain animators. This is the massive challenge that Taguchi and his team have taken upon themselves. For a project that has so much working against it both internally and externally, it would be fair to assume that they have done less than a perfect job with the project thus far. But let's see if this assumption holds true as we assess the episodes that we have received within Cour 2 thus far. On the story side of things, Bleach has been progressing very quickly with a few interesting additions that have been made that hint at some major payoffs that will occur later on in the story, as Cour 2 picks up with the introduction of Uryu as the latest member of the Sternritter. While I'm going to be taking a much deeper look into everything the anime is getting right, I can't help but to praise Taguchi and the anime team with how they are making these subtle adjustments to the Bleach story, and they are doing these additions that come together to form a picture that gets all the more interesting as we get deeper into Cour 2. Episode 14 and 15 embodies all of the additions that the anime staff are making, with how much it reveals about Uryu's past, as well as adding to the exchanges between the Sternritter, as it helps us to familiarize ourselves with this group of villains, which the anime at the moment is doing a better job at in comparison to the manga. We get to see the Sternritters casually interacting with each other. This of course is before they are defeated within their respective battles. So the first two episodes of Cour 2 adapt the least number of chapters, at least before episode 16, with about 4.5 chapters each, with a good amount of new content within each of the episodes. Episode 16 was the first proper action episode of the Cour, and it featured some really interesting fights like the conclusion of Soifon vs BG9 and Hitsugaya vs Kangdu, along with a really nice view of everything happening across the battlefield, and the battle between Mask D Masculine and the lieutenants Ikaku, Yumichika and Hisagi. And we also got a completely unexpected Bankai reveal for Shinji that in all honesty they could have saved for the anime adaptation of Can't For Your Own World, but it's not really that much of a big deal. This episode adapts the events of chapters 552 to 555, which makes it the episode that has adapted the least amount of manga chapters per episode thus far, and it becomes almost ridiculous to compare this episode to the following episodes that adapt a ridiculous amount of chapters. Episode 17 begins the major battles of Cour 2 as it masterfully adapts the battle between Bambietta and Komamura. While I don't think that the fight's animation was anything spectacular, the fantastic storyboarding and art direction made it a far more emotional battle than what it was in comparison to the manga. This episode also featured an entire minute worth of character acting from Hiroyuki Yamashita, who masterfully animates Komamura's transformation. This fantastic cut further enhanced the emotional gravitas of the scene, which earned the appreciation of many fans, despite Komamura vs Bambietta not being the most Sakuga-filled fight within Cour 2. This episode adapts the events from chapter 555 to 560, still maintaining somewhat of a decent pacing. Episode 18 was a highly anticipated episode as it adapted Renji's colossal clash with Mask D Masculine, and it involved the reveal of his true Bankai, as well as his first W in God knows how long. So to say everyone was excited to see Renji leave Fraud Academy would be an understatement, and unfortunately how the anime had handled this fight in particular may have been the moment where a lot of fans had started to lose hope within Cour 2. Almost the entire first half of the episode was dedicated to Rose and Kensei's battle against Mask, which was surprisingly well animated, but this weird choice in resource allocation resulted in Renji's fight being made significantly shorter in the anime. The first half of Renji casually wiping the floor with Mask is completely cut out entirely, and instead that whole section is replaced with a Rukia scene that honestly gave us nothing that we didn't already know. We then went back to the fight and Mask enters his holy form and begins to knock Renji around as he then finishes off the combo with his Star Flash Supernova. Then Renji responds with his true Bankai and he finishes him off with Zaga Teppo. This strange directorial choice made for a rather weird experience. This is because overall episode 18 was a good episode, but at the same time it only barely delivered Renji's triumphant moment to us, and it adapts everything from chapter 560 to 564, with quite a few notable omissions from these 5 chapters. Episode 19 was another highly anticipated episode, probably only second to episode 20. This episode adapts the entire fight between Asnod and Rukia, and our first sighting of the most beautiful Bankai in all of the Soul Society, Haka no Togame. And despite the fact that 2 more episodes have come out since its release, it is still generally considered to be the best episode of Cour 2, which is an opinion that I agree with. The episode is a beautifully storyboarded and directed masterpiece that is animated with nothing but intention. The episode works well despite having mostly average animation, which goes to show that not every fight needs to be a Sakuga fest. I can't shower this episode with enough praise, and it really has gone on to cement itself as one of the greatest Bleach episodes of all time. It adapts content from chapters 564 to 570, and the fact that the episode was able to perfectly nail adapting this many chapters per episode goes to show how the problem with the pacing might not necessarily be because of how many chapters are being adapted into any given episode, but rather the lack of talented storyboarders and directors who can skillfully fit this much content into an episode without cutting out too much content, which is once again a problem that the anime has been struggling with. The episode was able to make itself the center of attention in the week that it had aired. Now, this is no small feat considering episode 1072 of One Piece aired literally hours after the Bleach episode did, with some saying that episode 19 of Bleach had far outshone episode 1072 of One Piece. I'm not saying that it did, but the stats really do make for a very convincing argument. As you can see, Rukia was trending for such a long time, and the number of tweets had far exceeded One Piece 1072's tweets. So with the hype at an all-time high, it was time for the team to seal the deal with Kinpachi vs Gremi. To truly establish the peak of Cour 2's hype, you can assume that it would have been a very easy win for Taguchi and the team, right? Well, when it comes to episode 20, it adapts almost all of volume 64 of Bleach, which gives it the title of having the highest number of chapters per episode. After watching the episode, it becomes clear that this is definitely not a title any episode would want, because this episode is so busy drowning in all of the content that it needs to get through that there's little to almost no time for freedom or creativity with how it is adapted. This results in one of the most highly anticipated fights of all of Cour 2 feeling like a blur. The biggest problem with this episode was the fact that it had tried to cram the entirety of Yachiru and Kinpachi's conflict with Gremi into one episode, which is really unfortunate because there was a good amount of talent working on this episode. We had Wataru Yamamoto's storyboard for this episode, which was absolutely fantastic, and Kikuchi's direction, which was definitely good, but the problem of this much content being adapted created a situation where none of the talent had the chance to really show off the full scope of their abilities, because they had to adapt so much manga content while ensuring a certain amount of quality for the animation. This is what results in episode 20 being well animated but still feeling underwhelming because of all of the restrictions that the anime staff had to work under. The fights featured within episode 20 had no expansions or anime original scenes, with some minor parts actually having been omitted in order to make room for all of the content that they had to squeeze into the episode. Sections of the manga, like where different characters were reacting to Gremi's meteor, were cut entirely, and in the grand scheme of things they may be insignificant, but it really does help to sell us the scale of the fight that is being unfolded between Kinpachi and Gremi, and I think that including these reactions would have made the fight much more better. Overall, episode 20 was average in the end, when it had the potential to be so much more. And again, this episode adapts manga content from chapters 571 to 579. Now, episode 21 is another peculiar case that might be worth its own video to discuss, but right off the bat we knew something was off with this episode. The first sign was that the episode previews were delayed by a day. We even had more signs as the days went by that the episode had suffered from production issues slightly similar to those of episode 3 of Cour 1. This is because a number of animators who were on the show were fired for not meeting the art standards of the production. This was done so that the animation directors would waste less time having to redraw certain scenes. The episode adapts material from chapters 580 to 587, as we see Ichigo's momentous descent from the Soul King's palace and his clash with the Bambis. The episode does a rather fine job with the content, and the main highlight of the episode was easily Ichigo's conflict with the Bambis. It featured a particularly well choreographed exchange between Ichigo, Meninas, and Lil Toto. This anime original edition allowed all of the Bambis to show off their holy forms and a good number of their abilities and techniques, along with showcasing just how dysfunctional of a group they really are. Honestly, they stole the episode for me. They were genuinely fun to watch, and after this episode, I'm starting to see why Kubo was so insistent on showing us more of them within the anime. Now, all of this aside, the episode was a bit of a step down in comparison to episode 20. Although the art was really good, it was definitely a step down from what we can expect from the standards of Cour 2, and the storyboard of episode 21 was just average, and I do think that it could have been a bit more ambitious with its approach. Overall, for an episode that adapted Ichigo's long-awaited return to the main story, it was nothing but fine, which really shouldn't have been the case, and it hurts all the more when you realize that it wasn't intended to be this way. This now brings us to the 9th week of Cour 2's airing, where it's been confirmed that we're not getting an episode this week, but rather a recap episode that goes over everything that has happened within this cour. This has had me wondering if things are going well on Pierrot's side. Recap episodes are often used as excuses for production production teams to get extra time to work on their projects. This alone isn't necessarily a cause for alarm, but when you consider that Pierrot has also indefinitely suspended their upcoming Naruto episodes, it makes you wonder if they're holding up all that well on their end. Now, with all of this out of the way, let's discuss the reception for Cour 2 so far, because unlike Cour 1, which was met with unanimous praise, the reception for Cour 2 has been a bit more spotty. As more episodes of Cour 2 have been released, many fans have expressed their dissatisfaction with how the Cour has been handled. I intend to address each of the concerns made and try to be as fair as possible with them. But before going into that, I think it's pretty interesting noting that despite my critical look at the episodes while assessing them, and the large amount of fan complaints that have been received, looking at the general response from the audiences watching Bleach, Cour 2 has been received extremely well overall. So well in fact that in a poll that I conducted on the channel on whether if you guys were enjoying Cour 2 of Bleach so far, a whopping 95% of you said yes. For context, there were about 176,000 participants in this poll. This means out of all of the participants, only 8,800 people aren't currently enjoying the anime. And while this of course doesn't mean that every person who had clicked yes has no issues with the anime, I do think that it's pretty easy to tell that this just means that their feelings towards the anime are overwhelmingly positive. Paired with all of the positive attention that Cour 2 has been getting thus far across multiple different online platforms, we can tell that this statistic isn't necessarily an outlier. But at the same time, it is very possible that the complaints that I'm about to talk about are from people who still think very highly of Cour 2 in general. So they're not necessarily haters, as they could still love the anime but dislike one or two things about it. Now with this said, let's tackle some of the fan concerns. The first is the complaint of rushed pacing, and this is definitely one of the fairer complaints. This one is however subjective, since most anime only fans are enjoying the anime's quick pacing quite a lot, but for the sake of fairness, let's engage this opinion on its own merit. It's clear that the team is trying to adapt as much content as possible per episode, and it would be a lie to deny this. The anime staff have 52 episodes to adapt the entirety of the Thousand Year Blood War arc into anime form, in addition to trying their hardest to flesh out all of the parts of the story that need it. This number wasn't decided by Taguchi or any staff member, but rather the production committee that is in charge of Bleach. This means that they not only need to adapt the entire arc within 52 episodes, but they also need to make enough room for anime original content in order to flesh out the latter parts of the manga version of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, which a lot of fans deem to be rushed. When you put two and two together, this was unfortunately going to be the case, with the first two cours being rushed. So far, I don't believe that the quick pacing has necessarily had any catastrophic effects in the story so far, and it has even come to help the story in some parts, to be honest. By deciding to rush the pacing, it does come with several different side effects, some of which cause certain moments to lack their proper impact due to them having far less time to breathe within the anime. Some scenes end up being nothing but carbon copies of the manga due to needing to get through them as fast as possible, which results in little to no expansion for some scenes in the anime. Now it seems to be counterintuitive to think that Bleach is rushing through a lot of material, but my faith in Kubo's plans for the next two cours has me believing that he's going to be expanding upon a lot of the content that was rushed within the manga. If you're worried about the pacing, I would recommend you take a look at all of the anime original content that we have received thus far, and ask yourselves if you have preferred the few panels that were cut in exchange for all of these original moments. Personally, I choose the anime original content without a second thought, because I think that it's far more important than a few comedic dialogues or reactions that have been removed from the anime. The next concern that fans have expressed is the lack of good animation within Cour 2. This is another fair criticism that hurts me to admit. If you remember what I had said earlier about why adapting Bleach is really difficult, you'd know that this was bound to be one of the problems that the anime would soon face. The anime highly prioritizes making Kubo's art shine in the anime more than anything else, even to the extent of firing talented animators like Yugen for not having as firm of a grasp on Kubo's art style as desired. This means only extremely talented animators can deliver the quality that is required to give Bleach the animation most fans are wanting. Now this again goes back to the problem of the team lacking the connections needed to pull the required talent to the show, not to mention the very little time that they have been given to work on Bleach in the first place. The animation quality of the show isn't a product of Taguchi being lazy or the team not doing enough like some Twitter users would want you to believe. It's actually the complete opposite of this. It's due to the team's dedication towards making the best of what they have, which is why we've been able to receive masterpiece episodes like episode 6, 7, 10, 13, 17, 18, and even 19. Some of you may have even liked episode 20 and thought that was a masterpiece. I know that it was really well animated aside from the rushed pacing, but yeah, in general, I I think that this concern about animation will be less and less prevalent as the cours continue, because many may not notice it, but this cours has had far more consistent animation than Cour 1. With this in mind, I believe that by the time that we reach Cour 4, our animation worries will be history. So I humbly ask the Bleach fans to remain patient and to understand that even what we have now is a product of extremely dedicated people giving it their absolute all. But I guess appreciating what you have becomes difficult when you're constantly looking at what other anime airing at the same time are bringing to the table. I'm of course referring to Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, which is airing alongside Cour 2. The sages of old weren't wrong when they had said that comparison was the thief of joy, and it rings quite true in this situation. Just like the comparisons to Chainsaw Man during Bleach Cour 1's runtime, as Cour 2 has another massive Mappa show to contend with via Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. With Shota Goshizono as its director, Jujutsu Kaisen has undergone a massive makeover. His strong connections to talented webgen animators has given Jujutsu Kaisen animation quality that rivals top-tier productions like Chainsaw Man, Mob Psycho 100, and Heavenly Delusion. With Bleach airing in the same season, you can see why there would be comparisons. The problem is that these comparisons are made with no regard for the contextual differences between these two productions. They're about as deep as apples are better than oranges, which I find rather unfair. I've already explained the difficulties that Bleach's anime team has in adapting the manga, so let's talk about Jujutsu Kaisen's production strengths. Despite having roughly the same amount of production time as Cour 2, Jujutsu Kaisen has Mappa's numerous in-house animators and director Goso's insane connections. They also have the more advantageous approach when it comes to animating Jujutsu Kaisen. They are less focused on staying on model and have no qualms about sacrificing art for the sake of more fluid animation. They have even significantly simplified the character designs, so animating Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is a lot more easier than Season 1. This enables them to have significantly more expressive animation than they normally would, and this is the complete opposite of the Bleach team's philosophy. And unlike Studio Pierrot, Mappa has some of the most talented animators in the industry just a phone call away, especially the talented webgen animators that the director Shota Goshizono himself is a member of. This is why Mappa is able to have such exceptional animation quality and how they are so consistent with this quality. They're the exception and not the rule, which is what makes it so unfair to compare it to the more conservative Bleach production. I know this sounds like a generic be grateful for what you have speech, but there's not much more that we can do. This of course validates the complaints of people who are dissatisfied with the animation, and I can't say much there, but I feel holding Bleach to the standards of these superstar productions is harmful in a way that we haven't considered. By comparing Bleach to other anime, it prevents us from appreciating the gradual improvements that are being made in the production. I mentioned that on average, Cour 2 has had better animation in comparison to Cour 1, although I'll admit it hasn't quite hit the peaks of Cour 1 yet, but this is still considering that there are still 5 episodes left of Cour 2 to air, which could definitely hit those peaks. The upgrades in the overall quality of Cour 2's production has had very little appreciation from fans because we're too busy asking for Chainsaw Man's animation, not to mention that the quality and consistency of the art from Cour 2 far surpasses anything from Cour 1, but there's been very little praise for this either, which is really unfortunate. Okay, so enough with the negativity, let's get a bit more positive with what Cour 2 has improved upon. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is easily the art. Cour 1 is where I believe that the team struggled the most with adapting Kubo's art style. This is made evident by how incredibly inconsistent the art was in most of the episodes, with characters sometimes looking like entirely different people in some scenes. Cour 2 for the most part massively improves upon this. It takes Kubo's art and translates it in a manner that even transcends the original manga panels, and this is no small feat. I've yet to see any episode from Cour 2 sink to the lows of Cour 1's worst art, and I sincerely hope that we don't get this in the upcoming 5 episodes. Overall, this is a massive improvement that deserves far more praise than it gets. Another facet worthy of praise is definitely the massive jump in the quality of the storyboards. Great storyboards were often a rarity in Cour 1, with some of the worst being laughably bad. For context, I'm still traumatized by episode 3 and episode 4 storyboarding. Cour 2 on the other hand has had considerably better storyboards with far more ambition than anything that we have seen from Cour 1, which is almost a necessity due to the slightly lacking animation that Cour 2 has. This is how an episode with a rather average animation like episode 19 could be recognized as a masterpiece. I hope that they maintain this same quality of storyboarding going forward, and if anything, get more ambitious with what they want to do with them, as we place all of our trust in Wakabayashi to deliver more excellent episodes. Another incredible aspect of Cour 2 has to be the music. This isn't to say that Cour 1 didn't have any great music, but rather Cour 2 has carried on the tradition of using Shiro Sagesu's phenomenal music to good use, maybe even better than Cour 1 did. Shiro Sagesu's presence on the team has been nothing short of a blessing, and his music adds so much depth and weight to every moment of the anime, and it's hard to imagine what Cour 2 would have been like without Sagesu's music. One of the new positive areas of Cour 2 that have really increased my enjoyment of the anime are the anime original scenes. It's so fascinating being able to experience the feeling of mystery and excitement towards the Bleach universe once again, which is a gift that the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime has been giving to Bleach fans who are anime only or manga readers. We've gotten so many new looks at events that we've never gotten a chance to experience within the manga. For Cour 2, we got Ichigo's Irazu Sando training, the visions that he had during that entire sequence. Cour 2 also builds upon the mysterious relationship between Soken, Uryu, and Yhwach, and new interactions that set up a myriad of future payoffs. There's also a few fight expansions here and there, like seeing the fight between Mask and the Lieutenants, which happened off-screen within the manga. And then most recently we have the fantastic new fight between Ichigo and the Bambis, along with more subtle additions and changes, like Yhwach being shown to have seen Komamura's fall, Hashward being significantly less hostile towards Uryu in comparison to how he was towards him in the manga, and a better depiction of the scale of the war than what the manga was able to give to us. From my experience of analyzing Bleach all of these years, it's pretty clear to me that all of these small additions that may seem insignificant now are going to culminate into some massive reveals in the upcoming cours. My excitement for the content of Cour 3 and 4 is out of this world, and I'm still wondering just what kind of surprises await us within this cour. Adding all of this to the anime wasn't something that the staff needed to do, but I'm so glad that they did, and I can't wait to see where all of these changes take us. Another positive of Cour 2 would have to be the animation. While it doesn't have the same highs as Cour 1, this cour has had far more consistent animation. There's almost always a number of gut cuts spread out in an episode, which in a sense makes it better animated than Cour 1. But unfortunately, at the same time, the inability to hit the heights of Cour 1 puts a bit of a damper on this achievement. So we'll have to see how far Cour 2's animation goes with the upcoming 5 episodes that we have yet to see. One of the things present within Cour 1 that I feel is absolutely missing in Cour 2 is the aesthetic variation of Cour 1. Cour 1 had the vibrant colors of Karakura and its glorious sunset, as well as the greenlit deserts of Huecomundo and the vibrant blue of the Wandenreich Empire, and that's not even considering the special aesthetics crafted for certain fights and moments that take place within Cour 1. Especially during Yamamoto and Yhwach's titanic clash, Cour 2 on the other hand has had flat red skies and greyish blue buildings. It's a jarring contrast to the aesthetic vibrance of Cour 1. The more that I thought about this, I think that it's unfair to say that it's just fans being bored of red skies. Instead, this is an objective problem with Cour 2, and it's because most of the fights within Cour 2 take place under the dome of the Serite, which is coloured red, and with the Serite being replaced by the Wandenreich city, which has these blue icy cold structures. So from the very get-go, Cour 2 has been restricted with its colour variation. This is considering the fact that Taguchi is a director who loves to play around with colours in almost all of his projects. Even his last movie, Tunnel to Summer, featured some really visually pleasing colour plays that made the movie an absolute delight to watch. But for some reason, Taguchi seems to be limiting his ability to use the full expressiveness of colour within Cour 2, and it feels like a really missed opportunity. Now, this isn't to say that Cour 2 has been visually bland overall, because it's actually had some wonderful visuals throughout, but in comparison to the variety, intensity, and creative use of colours in Cour 1, I feel that Cour 2 might be lacking in this department. Now, thinking about what Cour 2 is failing on in comparison to Cour 1 is a lot more challenging than I'd first thought. I don't think that Cour 2 is doing as worse as Cour 1 aside from how it is handling the pacing for the big fights, but even that itself might be a subjective take if we're being completely honest. Most of the complaints that people have towards Cour 2 are very similar to the ones that they had for Cour 1. It's hard to consider them problems associated exclusively with Cour 2, so despite all of the fan complaints, there isn't too much to sink our teeth into if you want an objective discussion. So aside from the things that I've mentioned, there isn't really anything else negative to say about Cour 2, and this is further supported by the fact that the general audience still feels overwhelmingly positive towards the Bleach anime. So with everything that we have discussed, where do you think that we go from here? What should we expect from what's left of Cour 2? And most of all, what does the future of the Bleach anime look like? To answer this question, I think that we have to set our sights on Studio Pierrot, and honestly, I don't think that it's all doom and gloom. Very recent records have shown that Studio Pierrot is trying to up its game quite a bit. They have increased their entry-level salary for animators, and they are trying their hardest to gather more talent. We are hearing of several talented freelancers being signed on as full-time Studio Pierrot staff. I do hope that talented animators like Tatsuya Yoshihara and Isuta Miista become in-house talent for Pierrot too. It does make me wonder if these attempts at trying to improve that in-house roster of animators may be a little too late for the effects of these changes to be felt within Cour 2, since it's already very deep into its production and it's most likely going to receive almost nothing from these new additions that are being made to the Pierrot staff. Overall, I'm still very excited for what we can expect from Cour 3, and I do hope that it will have a much easier production, which brings us to the next question: what can we expect for the remainder of the 5 episodes of Cour 2? Honestly, I have no idea what the remainder of this Cour is going to look like, since it's hard to determine if the issues that plagued episode 21 were episode exclusive or are a constant in the actual production of the anime. I think the best way to approach the anime is to lower your expectations, and you may just be surprised by what you get in the end. The future of the Bleach anime is much brighter than most would lead you to believe, with the gradual improvements that are being made behind the scenes, which make me hopeful that Cour 2 is going to end on a strong note, and Cour 3 and Cour 4 will be absolutely amazing, and they're not going to disappoint us in the future. The last 2 Cours of Bleach will give the animators a lot of creative freedom, because we know it's going to feature a lot of anime original scenes, and I think that we've got a lot of genuinely special moments to look forward to in the remaining seasons of Bleach. Now, these were all of my thoughts concerning the current state of the Bleach anime. I hope that this video has helped you to learn a bit more details about the behind the scenes production of the anime, and hopefully you feel a bit more gratitude towards the Bleach team due to all of the hard work that they are putting into a series that all of us love so much. Let me know all of your thoughts on Cour 2 so far, and if you agree with me on some of the negative points about Cour 2 that I've discussed, as well as some of the positive areas that I've talked about. I would love to know all of your concerns and any positive areas that you've had for season 2 of Bleach's anime. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach update video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.